Welcome to the DNA Dojo podcast. So today's topic, we're going to talk about forms and all the different things that you can learn from forms. With your particular art and being more jiu-jitsu, you don't really have forms per se.
No, nothing. I was thinking about that. Nothing I think I've done in the martial arts world yet has really touched on forms at all, that much, if at all.
So for me, forms are not just about doing a series of moves together. It's about the form of a kick, the body mechanics of a kick. You're studying body mechanics. So that's how I look at it. It's how you're using your body and learning how to stay balanced, learning how to strike with your body, everything else. Now, when it comes down to doing forms, forms do several things for us. The first thing that it's going to do is it's going to help you with your balance, your body positioning, learning that if you get interrupted in your movement, that you could still land somewhere, where you're in balance, you're not off balance.
Okay.
Secondly, it helps fight against, mental decline as far as like a dementia or something, because you have to remember these moves that you're going through. So that's another thing with that.
What would you say, what if you were to just describe a form really quick, what would you say? Is it the inverse of what would you say a punch, or excuse me, what would you say a form is if someone said hey, tell me what a form is? What does that look like, if you could describe that?
Oh, that's a good one. I had an instructor that said the best form in the whole world is you do your solution, you knock the guy out, and then you do your salutation to come back out of it. That's what a form is. But the thing is you have to realize that in a fight that you miss a lot. Mm-hmm. And a form is designed that you're dealing against multiple opponents. You have to see in your head. Okay. And a lot of the forms, I know in more of the Shaolin arts, that you're using these techniques that are concepts and ideas.
So would you say a form could be akin to shadow boxing in a sense?
It could be, yes.
Okay. Mentally, we're ready. Okay.
It's how you string things together. Okay. And how you visualize and stay ahead. And it's putting your body in different positions that maybe it wouldn't naturally be into. Okay. So that's part of it, and we'll get more into that. The other thing is the healing aspect of forms. If you're in an art, and you should be in an art that does bag work, that does hitting, your working timing, engaging. When you're doing bag work or working against an opponent and you're hitting all the time, that's shortening up your tendons and your muscles, and you definitely get that tension because it reverberates back into your body. And what a form will also do is it helps you stretch the body out and to rebalance itself. So it's a healing tool as well.
Okay.
So, we have the mental part of forms right now. We have the balance, the timing, engaging of forms, and we have the healing aspect of forms. There's also the fighting aspect of forms, where you're incorporating some of your techniques or defense maneuvers or openers are going to be in those ones that they really want to stress. You'll see a lot of things pop up in forms quite a bit, because in that art that they feel that they're important, so that's why they put them in there. They put them in there to help you remember, these self-defense techniques, or actively, if your body gets put in this position, what you need to do.
Interesting.
So, also too, is forms teach you fighting on angles. So if you look at a form, in our art, we have like white belt kata, which is just basically a form that we use. So a white belt can have a form because they usually don't have a lot of forms at white belt because you're learning so many things.
Right.
But we take our blocking and counter system, and you do it just to 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So you learn to move your body in that direct straight line forwards and backwards. But then as you continue to progress, then you're going, now we're going to go 9 o'clock. Now we're going to go 3 o'clock. Now we're going to go 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, so on and so forth. Did you bring those angles in? So then you feel what it's like to move in that arena. And then you start going off at the other angles. You go off at 10:30. You go off at 11. You're like 1:30. You go off at 7:30, and so on.
Okay.
So you start learning those particular angles. So now you have a more of a complete movement around that clock and how to respond.
Yeah, I'd never really, like I said, never really done forms. No one really just ever talked about them. But the reason I brought up the shadow boxing analogy, or the comparison rather, is because I remember I was talking to someone who's a pretty good boxer at the gym, and he was saying, he's like, yeah, man, like shadow boxing is kind of the underrated skill set to learn in a way that really improves. It's really the fine tuning. And so it's interesting to see that, like, we've never really touched on forms, but that is kind of more of the fine tuning process of, the imaginary situation that really focuses and lets you work on that stuff. And so I think I not that I've really ever heard people like talk crap about forms, but like I said, no one really ever talks about them. But I think that is kind of an underrated thing that people should focus on, is like the shadow boxing, the shadow wrestling, the forms type stuff, the dry firing of things, if you will. I think that is like an underrated thing that people just don't do, because they're like, oh, like, why would I even bother with that? Like, I'll just go and hit the heavy bag as hard as I can, or like go spar. But that is like kind of that that hidden third thing that you need to work on.
Yeah. Another element you have is cardio. You do a form right, and you should be out of breath. Certainly when you're learning new forms, your body's moving in a way it's not used to moving.
Right.
So you definitely feel in the beginning of those forms, while you're going through the conditioning, you feel muscles and things that you're like, wow, didn't realize I was moving in a different way than I had been before. So it's about growing in that aspect of it. And also, too, it's just a mental game. I know I probably use football quite a bit. I haven't played football. But it's like a quarterback that's sitting back there, and during practice week, they're flashing up pictures of different defenses that he's going to maybe see. So then that way he can identify holes in the defense, or what play he needs to run against this defense. So mentally, you're constantly, looking at the situation and what you could or couldn't do to deal with a certain situation.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put that.
No, I have a different view on forms, and I would always ask the question, why are we doing this? Like, for what reason am I responding in this way with this particular idea?
Okay.
Is this person trying to grab me? Are they trying to punch me in the groin? Or, where are they trying to punch me? How am I using it? Am I going to block? Am I clearing somebody that maybe has a grip? Those are all things that you kind of learn out of forms as well.
Okay.
And identifying and continuing to move through things in a fluid motion.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I will probably start. I think I kind of was doing, because I would like mentally visualize different things and work on what I would do. So I think in a way I probably was doing some form of a form. I just never really thought about it or put that much into it. But I can, like, every now and then I will visualize, like, sit there and visualize and say, okay, if someone's doing this, then I'll do that and stuff like that. But having like a structured routine of forms, I think would be very valuable, and I think that's something I should probably start adding to my repertoire of things that I'm doing.
Well, if you look at it, like, grappling doesn't have forms, but in a grappling context, you're always flowing from one move to the next. Mm-hmm. So you have to, in a grappling situation, you start going after one thing maybe that is prevalent, and then you got to go, okay, this isn't working. So you have to decide, am I going to abandon this, or am I going to try to force it? And then you just flow on to the next technique, and eventually you go through enough techniques and the guy doesn't know what's going on, or the guy makes a mistake, and then you end up getting something. That, to me, in itself is a form for the ground, because you're just learning to flow from one technique to the next until you get to the ultimate goal.
Yeah, that's something I think a lot of people don't do in BJJ that I noticed. That me and the one guy I train with, we kind of do it a lot, but we just say, hey, this isn't going to be a hard round. We're literally just flowing. Like, if something doesn't work, like, instantly, just kind of flow to the next thing. And that's definitely something that a lot of people don't do, at least that I've noticed, and I guess more that maybe that's like a individual training thing. When I go to different schools to train, that is more like, hey, we're just going hard. But the value of, hey, this is just going to be a flow round for grappling, like you said, kind of, we're practicing more of a form, is a little bit overlooked as well. So they do have that, I guess, yeah, but not a lot of people do it, because it does seem like when you're in the sports world, a lot of people are just like 100% all the time, we're training, I'm going to choke you out, and it's kind of a lost thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at forms, though, are basically the straight technique of it is going through point A to point B to C, so on, to go through and set that up, and you need to have the right form. If you're kind of delinquent or deficient in that learning that process, you're probably not going to be able to set things up very well. And what happens in a fighting situation, or a sport, regardless of what you're doing, is you're going to get nervous and you're going to forget certain specific steps to setting up that technique. So to me, that's another version of forms, is you're going through the ultimate. If I had the time to set it up and just methodically go through this technique, then this is what I have to do. And that's, to me, is also part of forms.
Okay.
So if you break things down with a kick, there's 4 parts to a kick. There's the chamber, where you chamber your knee for whatever kick, and then you kick, then you re-chamber, and then you put your foot down.
Right.
And that's basically if you're taking a front kick or something. But then there's also 2 you have to learn, but that within that form, that once you get that down, then you're learning to use your hips, to put your hips into the kick. You're not just using your leg, you're using your whole body.
Yeah.
And you're learning how to use that power from the ground. And you get to a point where in some kicks you're not chambering, you're just throwing them from the ground, period.
Yeah.
So, but you need to learn, figure out, you have a good form in order to be able to learn how to use it that way.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I have been doing that recently with the heavy bag, where I'll just really slow it down, and I'll just kind of feel every single part of the kick up until I hit the bag and then the return. And that's definitely improved my kicking, just like unknowingly I've been doing that. Just like really pushing off the back foot to throw that kick up in there or something like that, or just really going slow with it, using the bag for a little bit of balance. But similar thing. Like, that's like, turns out I guess I have been doing form. I've been like I'll sit there and I'll go, okay, I have to distill down this technique to its purest form and try it then. And then you obviously can start speeding it up, and that's when you really start seeing some improvement there. But yeah, I guess I guess in a way I have been doing it, just not really thinking of it as a form, more of just like, all right, let me really just slow down and see how this feels. Let me really focus on, on a power punch, pushing off the back foot, cycling it all the way through, stuff like that.
Yeah. So if you look at forms in that context where, yeah, maybe you have a choreographed, routine that you do. I mean, there's some arts that have two-man forms where basically one person's doing a move and then the other person is countering that, and they're learning that flow of trying to react with somebody else. I think that's important as well. Also, just for the memory, I mean, I have at this point, just in pre-black belt forms, I have, let's see, I probably have about 13 or 14 pre-black belt forms, and then you get the black belt, you're probably learning 3 to 4 per belt at that point.
Okay.
So it's a lot. You have to keep on top of it and memorize, but it also embeds your art into your psyche as well.
Yeah.
I've made the practice of with taking my forms, because it's the essence of the art, and then I will take a different weapon and put it in my hand and see how that changes the form as well, because it's going to be dictated by controlling the weapon. If the recoil of the weapon, the weight of the weapon is going to carry your body in different ways. So you could also use your forms in that way to learn weapons, and just put a weapon in one hand and put a weapon in both hands and do your forms again. And it's immensely helpful.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess then adds a whole nother element of training to that stuff. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I feel like forms are kind of a simple thing to talk about, but there's a lot. It does a lot for you, but it is like a simple thing to train with. So that's a nice little tool to add to the repertoire of training.
Well, plus it's solo training.
Yeah.
You're training by yourself, so mentally you're putting yourself into a certain headspace to train, and you're always thinking, you're playing that chess match in your head.
Yeah.
So, we'll use the choreographed stuff for that. We have what's called defense maneuvers. Some people call it defense concepts, which are like smaller division, smaller moves put together.
Okay.
Which are maybe like, it could be 5 to 6 moves that you work on. Maybe it's a different opener, or that's teaching you a bunch of other ideas. But then you can also string those back together, because in the Shaolin arts, there was one, you just did them all together, and then they decided, okay, well, let's break these up into 108 individual techniques, so we can concentrate on the technique and what it teaches us, and get the concept, the idea, and the opening, And so that's another thing you can break down. If you take a simple concept, like the first thing that you learn in Kempo, defense maneuver, we used to number them. So, but there's probably better ways to categorize it. Was DM6. DM6 was just a front kick.
Okay.
But it's teaching you, if somebody's just coming straight in at you and you have that time to respond, then you just blast them with that kick.
Right.
It's like, come on, like, if you want to come straight at me,
yeah,
I'm just going to blast you with a kick. And it's about focusing your power forward. But also, too, at the same time, it's a pretty advanced technique, because it's in blocking, there's degrees of blocking, and it's the last one. It's no block. You're just hitting.
Right, yeah.
The second technique would be DM7, which is where we step off at a 45 and we throw a side kick, where it could be towards somebody's rib or somebody's knee. So that's teaching you another angle. you're not going at 12 o'clock. If you're doing it in a right-handed stance, now you're going off to 9 o'clock. The person's trying to bum rush you. So you step off the line of attack, and as they're going through, then you blast them with that kick. So then you could start chaining these things together.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to go angle 12. The guy's coming straight in. I'm going to do a front kick. Now, the guy's, I got another guy that's coming right after me. I'm stepping off to the side and blasting with a side kick. So that's a simple way to look at it and to string these together. Or you can work a clock drill where you go, okay, I go 12. Now I'm going to pivot. I'm going to go to 3 o'clock. I'm going to pivot again, go to 6 and 9. And go around the clock and go counterclockwise. These are all just different ideas that you get from forms.
Okay. Yeah, I like the scalability of forms. That's interesting. That, again, like we were talking earlier, like same technique, it just applies to everything. Like that's interesting with forms that you can, all right, I have the basic idea down. Now let's make it more complicated and see how it plays out. I like anything that can, if something has scalability, I like it. I think it has legs when something has scalability. Obviously, that's nice when stuff like that works out.
Yeah, and some people do some weird things with forms. I'm not a big fan, but I could see where there could be a benefit to it. We learn all our forms right-handed, based off of right-handed. But there's schools that tell you need to take all your forms and do them left-handed. And they do it as a left-handed fighter, which I think is good in a way, but I think also, too, if you're training the right way and doing your defense maneuvers or defense concepts, that you're training those right left-handed anyway, so you're balancing out your body.
Yeah.
I just never thought that the time and the effort to put into going left-handed really made that big of a difference for forms, but that's my own personal opinion on it.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hear about that.
Yeah, somebody's going to make a comment. Go, you're a certain rank, you should be doing them right and left-handed forms. Well, I'd rather concentrate on more, defense concepts right and left-handed.
Yeah, I remember asking a very similar question when I first started doing more self-defense stuff, and I was like, well, should you be doing it both right and left side? And he was like, yes, but also you're going to favor, like obviously I'm a southpaw, you're going to be favoring things on the southpaw, so you should learn how to do certain things left and right, but for the vast majority, like if you were to quickly react to a situation, chances are you're going to take a southpaw stance. So, for the initial thing, so yes, learn both sides, but also you are going to favor a side, so you should really nail down one before you start doing the other, or you make them work, but obviously not everything you're going to do is going to be hey, I can do everything left and right. I can do 75% of my stuff left and 75% right, or 100% left and 75% right, something like that, kind of whatever it is.
Well, in Kempo, you were kind of required at a certain level, you had to do everything right and left-handed.
Okay.
As far as weapons defenses, defense maneuvers, Kempos, which is another type of form of defense concepts and ideas. You had to do them that way. So I started out pretty early on doing it that way, because I knew, and I think that helped me, because then it helps you break it down mentally, because you're not going to have the same efficiency in the beginning of doing it left-handed as you did it right. So you always have to challenge yourself mentally and physically to do things. Now, my instructor was left-handed. He had to learn everything right-handed first, and then he could do his natural side of his body.
Okay.
But that's so deceiving, because you got a guy that can just throw a jab so hard, because that's his strong side. He's got a strong side, forward.
Yeah, I feel like that's how I am too. My left hand jab is pretty crazy because it's a left power. So if I do take a proper stance, it feels a little bit weird, but and that's the thing, my left power hook is really pretty strong too, just because it is weird. Like if I have or I guess I should say my left hook, if I'm in regular stance, is pretty crazy just because that's my power hand. So it is, you're right, it is deceiving, especially when I go up against like a standard person and I don't do southpaw, and then I switch to southpaw. It's all sorts of weird.
Yeah, I think it was weird for me on a personal level is when I was growing up, I remember picking up a pen or a pencil in my left hand and the teacher saying, no, don't do it that way. So they force you to learn how to write right-handed.
Yeah.
And then you wonder, like my dad's left-handed, so you wonder the programming in your brain, like if that really stunts you because they took something that you would naturally do and force you to do it the way everybody else does it.
Right. Yeah. I always kind of wondered about that too, because every now and then I'll try and write with my right hand just so I can see if I can do it and stuff like that. But yeah, my mom was the same way. She was naturally left and they forced her to be right. And yeah, I wondered, like, what kind of skill set do you lose from, essentially you're kind of starting from a negative place in a sense of, well, you're not doing it naturally with your right, or you're not doing it with your natural hand, so now you have to learn how to be natural and get to zero before you can start doing anything more. So it is interesting. It would be an interesting study.
Yeah, what's really interesting for me is when I hurt my right hand, I couldn't write, and I was forced to write left-handed, and it wasn't that big of a difference.
Really? Yeah, I guess because
So can you think, how more eloquent would I be with the left hand at that point?
I will say, as someone who is naturally left-handed, who is not forced to write with the right hand, my handwriting is atrocious. So who's to say?
So those are the different things that you learn from forms. You learn. You're memorizing certain things together, so it helps with that. You can always visualize forms. I know I like to visualize my material at night before I go to bed. I'll take some specific thing, either forms or DMs or some other type of concept, and I'll just run it through in my head.
Okay.
So you're constantly developing, even if you're not physically training it. You're still sending those cues to your muscles and your tendons in your body and how you're going to move and move more efficiently. You're learning balance. You're learning if I don't land correctly when I'm doing a form, I'm going to be off balance. Somebody's going to be able to pull me, push me, whatever. I'm going to be, if you don't. And also, too, when landing in balance with using a form, you're making sure your power is directed in the correct way. So that's another thing that you're learning from forms. Then you're strengthening the body with forms. You're getting that cardio workout. Then you're also elongating and stretching the body out and building your chi with forms. And it's reminding you of defense maneuvers or things that you've learned and how to apply them to a multiple range of opponents, or how your body's going to move when it gets put into a certain situation. I mean, you're going to kick some people, you're going to bounce off of them.
Yeah.
So if you don't train that way or put your body in that position, you're not going to know how to move to protect yourself. So that's another thing that forms helps us do is, I've been in this situation before. It's not new to me. I know how to react from here. And it does definitely creates muscle memory on how you react to certain situations. I think it definitely helps with your response, with forms, because it's hand-eye coordination. So I think that's the major part of what forms helps you have some type of pre-programmed movement and how to deal with those things.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you.
Well, you have a great day, sir.
You too.